What's going on YouTube? It's Teej back again with another video. Today, giving you my Week 18 NFL Power Rankings, the second to last we'll do before we hit the postseason. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you do, hit that like button. It would help me and my channel out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more football content and want to help us get to 400 subscribers, well, just hit that big red subscribe button down below. Also, while you're down there, comment your takeaways on these Power Rankings. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they should slide in at? Love to have your thoughts down in the comment section. Also, Happy New Year, everybody. Happy 2022. Hopefully, the end of last year ended on a positive note, was everything you wanted it to be and then some, and hopefully 2022 can become everything you need it to be, and you can manifest whatever you want this upcoming year for life goals, personal goals, etc., etc. But now, let's go ahead and jump into these power rankings. Obviously not a whole lot of movements. We won't stay on the screen a bunch. The Broncos down a couple spots. All of these teams lost. The Jets did make it a little interesting with the Bucks, but we'll talk about that. Once we get to that point, the Jags, Giants, Panthers, as the year has kind of gone on, it feels like the wheels have kind of come further and further off the vehicle. And then the Jets, Texans, Lions, they're in this next tier up where they're pretty bad, but every once in a while they give you a week where you're like, okay, well, there's something there, right? And this week it was the Jets against the Bucks. Texans didn't look all that good. The Lions didn't look all that good either against Seattle. Washington, this felt like a game where they could have hung around with Philadelphia, maybe played spoiler, right? You got embarrassed on Sunday Night Football. A chance for revenge against a divisional opponent who you lost to in your first meeting, but they just didn't get the job done, right? They're just not that good of a football team, so they fall short of Philadelphia. And like I said, the Broncos lose, having to start Drew Lock, not ideal. They're down to number 25. Let's go ahead and jump on to the top 24 now. The Atlanta Falcons lose kind of a weird game against Buffalo, but, you know, like I said last week, 22 was probably a little too high, but based off how the board played out, that's where they ended up at. Now kind of coming back down to reality at number 24. I'm sorry for everybody who's a fan of teams 32 through 24, but we're going to have some offseason content firing up here very soon, so those are all teams that will get a lot of conversation, a lot of talking points once we get to that point of the season. Seahawks with a pretty solid showing against the Lions. The offense looked good. What do you know? Good things happen when you throw the ball in the direction of DK Metcalf. Who's been saying that all year? Yeah, I'm not the only one. Plenty of people have been saying it. It's just disappointing that Seattle took this long to jump into that and take advantage of that. But they did get the win, take care of business against the Lions, up 2 spots. Bears obliterate the Giants in the Mike Glennon revenge game. LOL on anybody who thought that Mike Glennon was going to take it up another notch. Bears completely dominate. Robert Quinn sets the franchise record for sacks of the season. Good for him. He's had an up and down career, but this has been one of those up years. And another one of those teams is really interesting once you get to the offseason. Once they, potentially hire a new head coach, potentially a new GM, and we figure out where this team's, future is pointing towards. So really fun team to keep your eyes on this offseason. Really solid way to end the season after, demolishing the Giants this past Sunday. Ravens down a couple spots. They battled tough with the Rams. We'll talk about this game a little bit more as we go on, but they're just not at 100%, right? And it's really disappointing because this team, when it was at 100% and fully healthy, and they had Lamar Jackson playing well, they were able to throw the ball really efficiently, get big plays out of Hollywood Brown. There was a conversation to be had that they might be the best team in the AFC, but the wheels have kind of just come off, and now they're at 21 after falling 2 more spots. Browns fall down to number 20, and I know it's tough to take on Pittsburgh on such an emotionally charged night. We'll talk about the Steelers here in a moment, but Big Ben's last home game, more than likely. So just some outside football circumstances kind of not working in your favor before this one, but this felt like a game where Kevin Stefanski did not hold back, despite Mitchell Schwartz being the number 1 read on a couple of plays, and Baker Mayfield not playing 100%. He wanted to see who on this roster right now could potentially be around long term. This was also a big test, it felt like, for Baker Mayfield, and he didn't necessarily look great, which he tends to struggle against Pittsburgh, and it's also not going to help when James Hudson, your rookie, project of a right tackle, is having to try to slow down TJ Watt. That's hard to get your offense moving forward, and I think that's part of why we didn't see a whole lot of running games, because Stefanski wanted to see what Baker was all about in this setting, and overall returns were not all that impressive. So this Baker Cleveland situation continues to be one that's just beyond fascinating, right? Because it feels like Cleveland is going to move on from a guy who stopped the list of names on the back of the jersey. So it's a really tough spot Cleveland's in. But if you take away the emotional aspect of stopping that list of names, Baker just has not been that good this year, and he didn't look like he passed the test against Pittsburgh on Monday Night Football. But tough way for the Browns to have their season pretty much come to a close. I know there's Week 18, but postseason is now out of the picture for Cleveland, despite them being on paper. And I said this as well as many others, one of the best teams in the AFC, but this just wasn't their year, I suppose. Saints up a couple spots, took care of business in a weird, ugly game against the Panthers, pulled away late. Taysom Hill, I don't think, looked all that bad. It'd be interesting to see what they would have as a potential quarterback option if Michael Thomas played, right? Because then you move Callaway and Deontay Harris to number 2 and 3, and that wide receiver depth chart, kind of like the Raiders, who I'll talk about here in a moment. When you just have one big name guy and you kind of realign where everyone else goes, it makes the picture look that much better. And it'd be interesting to see what they could get out of Taysom Hill if they had Michael Thomas playing right now. But overall, this team has a shot at the playoffs, which is still amazing to say. And a ton of credit there to Sean Payton. It's amazing that they've been able to stay alive. Plus, that defense has been stellar. Ton of credit there to Dennis Allen. Raiders, kind of that same spot. We'll talk about the wide receiver room. Like Hunter Renfrow, who you see on your screen now, and Zay Jones feel like pretty competent 2 to 3, and then maybe your 4th option. I feel like Hunter Renfrow, if he's your 2 and he's just a architect from the slot, okay. But if he's your 3, even better. And then if Zay Jones is that 4th, and you can kind of rotate him in and give everybody a breather whenever they need it after a couple plays. He can play on the outside, he can play a little bit on the inside, I think. That's a really interesting role. And then, if he's your 4th, that's fantastic. But I even think he can get by with him as your 3, depending on who your number 1 is. But man, to see Derek Carr and the Raiders as a team overall just like will themselves into this playoff discussion. Every time I feel like I count the Raiders out, I'm saying, okay, yeah, well, this is where they kind of drift away and out of the playoff hunt. They come up with a huge win. More often than not, it feels like it's on the road, and that's the case this week, taking down Indy at Indianapolis. And now they're in a spot where I assume that the Jags are going to lose this upcoming week, and Houston's going to lose to the Colts. And if the Colts win, they lock up a playoff spot. Actually, I think the Colts might be playing the Jags. I might have that backwards between them and the Titans in that AFC South battle for positional seeding. But I assume that game will go as it does, and Colts get a playoff position, and that makes Sunday Night Football Raiders-Chargers win or go home for a wild card spot, which in that setting, the Raiders have been lights out this year, which is really interesting, but I feel like the Chargers are a better team, so next Sunday Night Football is going to be a really fun game to watch. But the Raiders, man, just give them credit. They are finding a way to keep their names alive. Now, it's not always pretty, and it takes a whole lot of effort, it feels like, out of Derek Carr, but here they are, absolutely exceeding my expectations, especially as the year's gone on. They've just been given roadblock after roadblock. They have just made big plays and won big games. Minnesota Vikings down a spot at number 17. This game was decided when Kirk Cousins tested positive for COVID. If you didn't hear, Mike Zimmer sees Kellen Mond every day at practice. Therefore, he felt the need to subject us to Sean Mannion for a little over 3 hours. That was unbelievably rude. It's maybe encouraging for Vikings fans that it does get worse if it's not Kirk Cousins. But this team should be in the playoffs, given how much offensive firepower they have. Zimmer has done good work with that defense, but now they're just so brittled and injury-ridden that there's only so much he could do that, the Vikings are going to miss the playoffs. And I think that's it for Zimmer then. And, it's interesting. You look at them and the Broncos. Vic Fangio and Mike Zimmer, they become defensive coordinators. They might be two of the best defensive coordinators in the entire NFL, if not two of the best, two of the top 5, right? And they're both potentially going to be losing their head coaching job this offseason here in a couple of weeks. So really interesting to see once we get to the offseason where those guys might go and how that changes the landscape of the NFL. But it does look like Mike Zimmer's tenure as head coach of the Vikings is coming to a close. On to the top 16 now. Pittsburgh, I am a Steelers fan, so I'll talk about this a little bit. I know everybody's talked about Big Ben a ton. I recorded my picks video before it was announced this was more than likely his last home game. This game kind of encapsulated what Big Ben as a Steeler has been over the last 18 years. And I know sometimes we kind of force these molds onto situations to fit the player, but last night was gritty, ugly, plenty of times hard to watch, unorthodox, whatever word you want to throw onto it. But that's been Big Ben and his time with the Steelers, where he hasn't always had the prettiest throwing motion, right? He's not super mobile. He's kind of awkward to watch in the pocket. He's shrugging off tackles instead of making guys miss. And just throughout his tenure, it hasn't exactly been how you would draw it up, how you would perfectly see it come to fruition. But he has just made plays and made it happen, right? He's won so many games. great Steeler in the regular season, gotten it done in the postseason, big postseason wins, and 2 Super Bowls with 2 different head coaches. And even after the game, you see the city love him, which is really impressive considering the last 3 years, he has not played well, and this city has not been afraid to let him know their thoughts on his play. So in this last home game for Big Ben, to see him love the city, I don't know how many times in his postgame I heard him say, I love this stadium, I love this city, I love this fan base, I love playing in front of these fans, they're the best in the world, etc., etc. And the city completely showed their love for Big Ben, and that was really awesome seeing. And like I said, I think this game kind of encapsulated what Big Ben has been for the last 18 years in a Steelers uniform. Also a good win against a divisional opponent on primetime, so that helps as they move up a spot. Dolphins down 3 spots. This kind of felt like the reality check we all saw coming, right? Their winning streak, their defense balled out, but it was against a lot of mediocre quarterbacks outside of Lamar Jackson when the Dolphins kind of created that, blitz and lanes game plan that has really caught on against Lamar before he got hurt. So give them credit there. Brian Flores and that defense, they did make the mold to how to defend Lamar, but everything else along the way has been relatively easy on that side. And this was a spot where the Titans defense might be one of the best in football, might be the best in football. And they've been so good at making adjustments and taking away your biggest strength. So they take away the underneath passing game, and Miami doesn't really have an answer after that point, because the offense can't do anything and control time of possession at all. They're putting their defense right back on the field after short breaks. And the Titans, just as the game went on, started to pile on the points and really stretched this one out to kind of blowout status. So unfortunate loss there for the Dolphins. Basically ends their season. They're now out of the playoff conversation. So it also did showcase that I think Tua can be a starting quarterback, maybe if he gets a new scenery, Pittsburgh, Washington, New Orleans, any of these QB-needy teams once we get to the offseason. But if Miami truly wants to be a Super Bowl contender and really complement that defense, it's not going to be Tua Tagovailoa as their starting quarterback. It's going to be a Russell Wilson, a Deshaun Watson, and Aaron Rodgers, someone like that, which makes the offseason, again, that much more interesting. Philadelphia Eagles, LA Chargers, Arizona Cardinals, and Tennessee Titans all up a spot. We'll kind of talk about them one by one. Eagles, this, again, kind of felt like a trap game where the Washington football team steal one away from Philly and make that NFC playoff picture really weird. But Philadelphia did a good job weathering the storm early on, and as the game went on, just proved that they were the better team. Got the road win. You'll hear me say that all the time, especially in these divisional settings. Road wins are not easy to come by. This was a gritty, not necessarily the prettiest game that the Eagles have played, but this was one that just makes you feel that much more validated in seeing this team as a playoff contender. So a good win for the Eagles. Chargers, it's unfortunate that you have to find yourself in this spot considering the loss last week against the Texans, but got back on track, demolished the Broncos, took advantage of the fact that Drew Lock is nowhere near as good as Justin Herbert, despite him trying to be. And they got themselves back on track to where if they win next Sunday, take down the Raiders, they are in the postseason. Shouldn't have been that worrisome, but this was a game to get back on track, get the right your wrongs, and now you're a game away from putting yourself in the playoffs. And once they get into the playoffs, I think a couple more adjustments. I like Brandon Staley. I obviously love Justin Herbert. Guys get healthy. Guys get off the COVID list. This team can be alive with anybody inside the AFC playoff picture. Cardinals probably had the most impressive win of these 4 teams, obviously taking down the Cowboys in a potential situation where we'll see these teams maybe again in a couple weeks, depending on the playoff picture and how it falls out. But the Cardinals, and with that said, it's kind of interesting to think about where these two teams might be keeping something up their sleeve, right? Maybe the Dallas Cowboys are holding on to something. Maybe the Cardinals and Cliff Kingsbury are trying to save something for the postseason. But for the Cardinals, you snap a 3-game losing streak, and this win had to be had. Like, you could not leave this game with your 4th consecutive loss. Otherwise, things were going to start getting really murky for the Cards. But this was a huge win. Take down a legit opponent. The defense played great, slowed down that passing attack, and you made Dak look uncomfortable, and you really brought out some problems I now have with the Cowboys offense, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But as the game went on, it felt like that Cardinals offense just made enough plays throughout the entire of the game, and Adrian Wesley might be something there. Was a big body contested catch guy, especially with DeAndre Hopkins out. So they're figuring things out. They're still a really fun, competitive football team. So Cardinals move up a spot to number 12. And the Titans, we talked about a little bit, knocking off the Dolphins. Their defense is legit. And this is a spot where I didn't want to move them up too much. I think you could move them up above the Patriots and maybe ahead of the Colts even. But if this team holds on to the number 1 seed and they get to win next week, all signs point towards Derrick Henry coming back. Off the COVID list comes Julio Jones, which hot take maybe. Julio Jones is washed, but I still think like earlier this year he had that insane game against Seattle. I think he's capable of maybe 1 to 2 more of those big outburst performances that make you think Julio of old. And if that's potentially in the mix, you have to account for him, right? And that makes it that much harder to try to account for A.J. Brown. And then also you have to try to slow down that rushing attack. But specifically with Henry coming back and how good the defense has been, if you add further elements, I know D'Onta Foreman's been fine and he's been pretty good actually, but you add Derrick Henry in the mix and his ability to weather down defenses over the course of a game, but also further allowing you to control time of possession and make this into a grind against the clock, and then fully let your defense catch their breaths on the sideline, making them that much better. This team, if they're fully healthy in the postseason, legit Super Bowl contenders. I am all in on the Titans if they are at 100%. I think they are a very sneaky team, and then a large part of that is because this defense is by far, in a way, vastly improved to where I thought they would be at this point in the season if you asked me 6 months ago. So I'm really feeling the Titans right now. Patriots stay put at number 10. You know, I know it's not always pretty, but top 10 feels about right for this team. The defense is still playing at a high level, and really comes down to whichever way, the Mac Jones wind blows, right? However he plays, that is the ceiling of this team. If he's having issues reading defenses and it's just checking it down and not really fully stretching the field, well, then this offense takes a big step backwards and they're kind of a middle of the road, maybe above average team. But when he's able to fully have a game plan around him and he's able to pick apart a defense, stretch the ball, not necessarily deep down the field, but he can work that intermediate parts of the field, this offense finds a new gear, and then it builds on top of the rushing attack that I think is there week in and week out for New England. And then this team is dangerous as it gets really in the AFC. So it's still So this team is obviously still a very dangerous one once we get to the playoffs. The Colts down 4 spots. This was more of a case, I think, of the Raiders winning a game I think they didn't have any business winning versus the Colts blowing it. Now, there were some turnover-worthy moments there for Carson Wentz. One even ended up as a touchdown, which is interesting. But this defense still legit. Darius Leonard creates turnovers left and right. I hope they can find and generate enough pass rush once we get to the playoffs. But the rushing attack is always there with this team. When the offensive line's healthy, it's maybe the best in football. So, obviously, a very live team for the playoffs. On to the top 8. Cowboys down 2 spots. Kind of similar to the Raiders. Colts game where I think it's more of a case of the Cardinals earning the win against Dallas. But nonetheless, this offense did hit a little bit of a lull, and it got a little better as the game went on, but kind of feels like, leaning into my military history background here, there's a difference between a strategist and a great tacticianist. Strategist, whether you're talking the entire war, just an individual battle, you're looking at the big picture, what you're trying to accomplish here and how you make that happen. Tacticianists are those who are making the calls on the fly, and when the bullets are fray, what are you doing to try to accomplish your strategy, accomplish your mission? And it feels like Kellen Moore might be this guy who's an awesome, NFL offensive strategist, game plan creator, knows how to write a good script. But then if things aren't hitting right away, making that adjustment in game sometimes a little slow, and that ultimately kind of felt like the difference where the Cowboys got going a little too late in this one. So that could be something that holds this team back down the stretch once we get to the playoffs, but also it might hurt Kellen Moore and his potential head coaching hunt this offseason. So we'll see how that plays out. And maybe it was just this game, right? Like, you don't get to see that opportunity all that often with a good football team, right? It's not often Dallas plays from behind. So we'll see if it comes back and it becomes something I see again. Then it becomes an issue if it's a reoccurring problem. But it might have just been this one game, but I'm still feeling pretty good about the Cowboys. I think that defense is a nice complement to everything that could be there with the offense, though it does take a blow with Michael Gallup tearing his ACL. San Francisco 49ers going to stay pat here at number 7. I didn't move them last week, despite the loss on Thursday Night Football to the Titans, and I think it's just because I respected the Titans earning that win, and I wasn't all that worried about San Francisco because Jimmy Garoppolo kind of held them back in that game against Tennessee. But this week, I was encouraged by what I saw out of Trey Lance, right? As the game went on, he got better. And you hope, it's only his second start, so we don't know if it's really a trend, but what if he starts week 18 and you continue to see that progress build upon itself? Now, I know Jimmy G has a chance to play, and this is a must-win game for the 49ers against the Rams this upcoming week, but if Lance is really this guy with less than 400 dropbacks in college, and now he's made 2 starts, and you kind of start to see him get better, I want to see him on the field as opposed to on the sideline and watching Jimmy G. Coin toss. Is he going to be efficient? Okay, or is he going to chuck at the linebackers every other play? I'd assume if you're going to get a roller coaster, go with Trey Lance rather than Jimmy Garoppolo, but this team is in a good spot. Whoever it is, playmakers everywhere. There's enough pass rush to keep that defense afloat. This is a good team. I didn't move them down last week from the loss. I don't want to move them up this week because I like the top 6 ahead of them, despite them coming up with a good win. Now, a team they did beat a couple weeks ago was the Cincinnati Bengals, but I would argue this Bengals team is a little different than the Bengals team that lost to the 49ers a handful of weeks ago, and even the teams before that. Zach Taylor has made the right adjustment. Part of the reason I didn't think the Bengals would beat the Ravens last week was because I didn't see Zach Taylor turning the ball over to Joe Burrow and letting him sling it around the yard and take advantage of bad DB play that the Ravens were forced to roll out with given all their injuries. They did. And that trend continued this week as they played from behind for the most part against the Chiefs. And I wouldn't blame you if you saw this game 28-14 say, okay, well, Cincinnati, they had their chance. They're a fun team, whatever, but they can't keep up with Kansas City. But they battled back, and Joe Burrow showed a ton of adversity, and Jamar Chase put on an all-type of rookie showing, balled out, 266 yards, 3 tutties. Guy was fantastic. And, T. Higgins was in the mix. Tyler Boyd made some big plays. You also have Joe Mixon as well. When this team plays like they have the last 2 weeks, and Zach Taylor, honestly, if he just becomes, instead of, I came from the Sean McVay tree, so I had to run an offense like him, and I kind of hate how the NFL does that. This person comes from this coaching tree, so they're going to do this on offense, or they're going to do this on defense. Zach Taylor, maybe his point to being a good NFL head coach is, I'll reassess week by week and see what our biggest strengths are, what are our biggest weaknesses, and I'm going to find a strategy that complements the team I have in front of me. I'm not going to be a Sean McVay disciple. I'm going to be a guy who makes adjustment week by week and puts my team in the best position to succeed. And, the last 2 weeks, maybe he saw, I need to get the ball in the hands of Joe Burrow more often because the dude makes big plays whenever he's throwing it. And what do you know? It's worked over the last 2 weeks. So when this team plays like this, like they did against the Ravens, but then even more so this week against a legit opponent and a team that wasn't rolling out their, 6th and 7th string corner essentially, like the Ravens were, this is a Super Bowl contending team because they have enough pass rush and they have good quality secondary players and a ton of them, right? Chidobe Awuzie, Mike Hilton, Von Bell, Jesse Bates is a really good football player. Trey Waynes is not seeing the field. They have good players. And they have a lot of them. Depth in the secondary with good pass rush. I think that defense can hold up. But also when you have a quarterback throwing for 950 yards over a 2-week span, that's going to be an offense that makes you not worry about the defense so much. So I think if the Bengals keep playing like this, they are legit Super Bowl contenders, which, great, must-see TV. But if they revert back to, hey, we're going to run the ball, 60-70% of the time on early downs and in short yard situations, we're going to kind of roll back Joe Burrow, then, I'm out of the Bengals. So it is a big contingency, but if they lean into Joe Burrow being the guy, I'm here for this Bengals team. On to the top 5, Buffalo Bills win a weird one, but they take down the Falcons by 15. And this is a game where I know Josh Allen had some turnover-worthy moments, but they still find different ways to win. I think that's something this Bills team has this year that they haven't had the last couple of years, specifically last year. Devin Singletary over 100 yards rushing, and Josh Allen continues to have his legs be a huge part of the offense. And if he's turning the ball over, throwing it, he is just as good as a runner. And then you add in, they have been able to get Devin Singletary an efficient running attack, and the offensive line isn't great in front of him, but they've been able to make it work. And maybe it's just they're trying to add a wrinkle into team's game plan, saying, "Hey, okay, Buffalo legitimately can run the football this year. We have to account for that." Maybe like they couldn't last year, or maybe it's saying, "Hey, Josh Allen's our guy, but if he's having issues and you're giving him confusing looks defensively, we'll run it down your throat. It's okay." Maybe it's the Bills are evolving. Maybe it's them just trying to tease something and force teams and opponents they might play in the postseason to have to account and be honest when it comes to the rushing attack. Either way, I think it's a good sign that the Bills are being able to do that. in one way or another, they become that much harder to account for and defend offensively. And even without Tre'Davious White, this defense is still really solid. Now, I know it's the Falcons, and it's nothing that crazy, but the defense is still playing at a high level despite Trey White being out for the rest of the year. So I'm still all in on this Bills team. They're back in the top 5. Chiefs are down a spot. Again, similar to the whole Raiders, Colts, and then the Cardinals, Cowboys discussion. This felt like the Bengals earning a win versus the Chiefs losing it. Now, you could say down the stretch, on top of some questionable, penalties and whatnot that kept the Bengals alive. 3rd and 27 has been a play that's discussed a ton, right? But Spagnuolo has always been this, I'm going to send the house type of DC. Like, I'm going to be aggressive, and you live by it, you die by it. I appreciate in that spot, Spagnuolo said, hey, second-year quarterback, beat me. Hey, rookie wide receiver, beat me. I'm going to throw some pressure in Burrow's face. And hey, it worked this time around. But I also can say that in full confidence, knowing that if these two teams play each other in the postseason and there's a 3rd and 20 whatever that comes to fruition once again, Spags ain't making that same decision twice. He's going to trust the 4-man rush to get home, and he's going to have a second defender in Jamar Chase, and that's part of what makes Spags such a good defensive mind, is he knows when to make the right adjustments, and he's been doing it for so long, so it makes a ton of sense there. He's not just going to be relentlessly blitzing you and not learn from his mistakes. He is one of the best in the game for a reason. He will learn from this moment, and if these two teams play in the postseason, same situation happens, you will not see an all-out blitz. But this game had a ton on the line, right? No longer the number 1 seed for Kansas City, and that definitely hurts. But if this defense continues to play like it has down the stretch into the postseason, if that carries into postseason play, defense travels, there's enough offensive firepower to where they can go anywhere and beat anybody still. Because, maybe at full strength, they're still maybe the best team in football, which is, that's a debate. Bucs up a spot to number 3. Now, this is a tough one. I kind of want to keep them at 4 because now we've seen, especially with Antonio Brown, which I'll talk about here in a moment, this team not at full strength, right? Lots of defensive players on the COVID list, and you're already down. Chris Godwin out for the entire year. Lenny Fournette out for the regular season. This team not at full strength. When the Jets have a good day, and the Jets are a bad football team, but everyone has good days. But the Jets' good day is not necessarily the Packers' good day, right? But if the Jets have a good day and the Buccaneers are struggling and are not at 100%, they can get locked into a good one with the Jets. And that's a bit of a wee-woo because, again, what happens when you play in Lambeau and the Packers are playing at 100% and they're rolling on all cylinders? You're not keeping up. If you're in a battle with the Jets in that same situation, you're not keeping up with Green Bay, especially with the reinforcements they're going to get back, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. But this Antonio Brown thing, it's just a tough scene, man. And I feel really bad for Tom Brady because this is a guy who went out on a limb to give AD his 4th chance in 12 to 18 month span when nobody else was looking for it. And there is so much that the NFL will let you get away with, whether it's criminal situations and maybe you're facing arrest, or even Deshaun Watson, right? 22 sexual harassment and assault cases against him, and there's still teams trying to trade for him. But if there's one thing that players, coaches, execs, fans, whoever, anybody in and around the game will not stand for, it's a dude quitting on his team, because we've all been in a spot where we had the choice we could do the easy thing and leave, or we could do the difficult thing and stay. And we chose to stay. So no matter what your situation was, this is a spot where you look at it and you say, Antonio Brown gave up on them. That's horse shit. Sorry for the language, but he's not going to get a second chance. This is it. Antonio Brown's done now. So really tough scene there for Tampa Bay, and especially now you look at that pass-catching core that's already been thinned out right now. You're leaning on Scotty Miller, Jalen Darden, Zero Grayson, who I know has a ton of speed and has made some big plays. Rashad Perriman, same thing. You're leaning on those guys to be the complements to Mike Evans, who's a legit number 1, that much more. And, of course, you have the tight ends as well. And, again, you hope to get Fournette back for the playoffs. But, man, it's so much easier for that offense to operate at full strength when it's Evans and Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Gronk, Brait, et cetera, versus Mike Evans and Zero Grayson, Rashad Perriman, Scotty Miller, Jalen Darden, et cetera. So, you hope to get those players off the COVID list and you get some of those injured players back. But I still think this is a good football team. This was an MVP type of performance. Brady on the road, overcoming a lot of adversity and a lot of weird stuff to take down Jets team that he's seen a ton. Now, granted, the Jets play calling at the end of the game really did not help keep Tampa Bay down, but this was an MVP type of showing for Brady. Hopefully he can get some of those weapons back, and then this team was back in that Super Bowl conversation. Rams and Packers both stay put. We'll start with LA. Look, I know it wasn't a pretty game, and this should have been what it was last week for the Ravens, right? Where, Rams come in, they have a ton of wide receivers, a big arm quarterback, and they sling it all over, an injury-riddled secondary. That's what it should have been. But give a ton of credit to Wink Martindale, the Ravens DC. Felt like he knew what McVay wanted to do before McVay even made the call. So playing chess instead of checkers, a step ahead. And then that forced the Rams to backpedal a little bit and make a ton of adjustments on the fly. And I think what you saw from LA this week and even in weeks prior is we thought we needed Matt Stafford to be an elite top 10 quarterback week in and week out. And if we're going to win the Super Bowl, we're going to still need 1 to 2, probably even 3 games where he plays like a very good top-end quarterback. And that might be what holds them back, because maybe he chucks it at Chuck Clark or someone thereabout. Once we get to the playoffs, obviously not going to be Chuck Clark because the Ravens are out. But you get my point, where his turnovers just get the best of him, and he kind of ruins the year for the Rams. But you're also starting to see this team now say, maybe we don't need to lean on Matt Stafford, and we can take advantage of Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson, and we're going to get Cam Akers back for the playoffs. And maybe we become this ground and pound team, and we rely on our defense that little bit more. And that's a way we can win games. So it's encouraging to see this team has found a different route in which they can come away with a dub. And you got to think, the Ravens are one of the best coach teams in football, one of the most prideful organizations in football. They have a high standard, a high bar to hit, and it's not an easy place to play. So for the Rams to go into Baltimore, take down one of the best teams in the NFL and one of the most respected organizations in the NFL, that is not easy. Additionally, one last note for the Rams. OBJ came out with some Robert Woodsian type of plays down the stretch in this game. And what I mean by that is, like, Cooper Kupp has had a gaudy year putting up numbers, but it always felt like when you saw, Jared Goff on a third down, or even this year, Stafford drops that arm down to 3/4 angle and he needs to pick up and move the chains on a big third down late. And this week, it was OBJ, that third down conversion, last drive of the game. The Rams ultimately take the lead and win 2019, but it was made possible by OBJ stepping up into that Robert Woods type of situation where they're not the same player, but big play, got to move the chains, got to keep this game alive. It's OBJ coming through in a clutch spot. Really been awesome to see him integrate in that offense, and he's improved his stock a ton for this offseason, the contract that he should now garner versus what he would have had, if he was still in Cleveland. So there are positives to take away from this game, despite the Rams really, I think, in their fan base in specific, wanted this to be like 36-10 or whatever. And it ended up being a lot closer, but I still think there's some positives to take away for LA. And the Green Bay Packers, they're playing like the best team in football right now. And that's, again, without their left tackle, it might be the best pass protector in the league, a top 3 cornerback in my eyes, and Zadarius Smith, their personal best pass rusher. Rashawn Gary might give them a good run for their money once I see him on the field. At the same time, excuse me. But hey, they're getting it done. Rodgers is playing like an MVP. I believe he's the front runner when it comes to betting odds. 1-2 punch with Jones and Dillon in the backfield. Devontae Adams is unguardable. Getting enough plays out of all those secondary and tertiary options on the offensive side. This is the best team of football right now, and they're only going to get that much better once they get reinforcements. Sounds like Week 18 might be starters play a couple of drives, and then the backups come in. So some even more rest on top of the first round bye because you're the number 1 seed in the NFC. So, yeah, things are looking good if you're a Packers fan, to say the least. But that's going to do it for my Week 18 NFL Power Rankings. Tell me what you think down in the comment section. Who do I have too high? Who do I have too low? Who's your favorite team? Where do you think they should slide in at? And hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, hit that like button. It would help me and my channel out a ton. And if you're new to the channel, want to see more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.